Fearless and truthful.
Provocative and controversial.
We say it like it really is.
With dignity and respect. Committed to free speech and common sense. Upbeat and entertaining.
Straight talking and direct.
We may agitate each other and you.
Thought-provoking, provocative and controversial.
Hello and welcome to The Pledge. Now, for a short time this week, MPs considered breaking up for their summer holidays early. The plan was eventually dropped and widely seen as an underhand attempt by the government to limit the amount of time for backbenchers to plot against Theresa May. But fear not, there'll be no slacking or early holidays on The Pledge. After all, I need all the time I can get for my campaign to get Greg kicked off the show. Coming up, Afua says immigration was the true winner in the World Cup. Majid urges caution over designer babies. Greg is on an anti-Trump crusade again. And Michelle says, hands off my sausages. But first, it's me. She's done it. She's only blooming well gone and done it. Showing she boasts the hide of a rhinoceros, the ability of the steeliest penalty shootout side, and the cunning of the rattiest of the Love Island love rats, Prime Minister Theresa May seems able to pack the walking boots for her summer holes. Surrounded by her own Conservative MPs, many of whom are revolting in every sense of the word, Mother Teresa must have enjoyed a holy intervention to limp over the line. But now is the time, Prime Minister, to react to your very own May Day. You have presided over and sanctioned months of pitiful indecision. When you return, seize the moment, shrug off the, quotes, fog of self-doubt and miserable permanent limbo Boris Johnson speaks of, and extol a vision of a Brexit which makes us all yearn rather than yawn. We pay 650 MPs a minimum of £77,000 a year. Is it too much to ask you, Prime Minister, to lead them to divine a solution to all of this? Otherwise, what precisely do we pay for?
Well, it's a very, very difficult position she's in, surely. I mean, whatever she does, she's going to face opposition. And a while back, I think, on this show as well as elsewhere, I've said that ultimately, I think what's going to happen is that the hard Brexiteers will be dissatisfied with whatever she proposes, and of course we Remainers will be dissatisfied with whatever she proposes, and we'll end up in this kind of unholy alliance together opposing her measures, which could lead to a vote, whether in Parliament or a people's vote. But I do think ultimately it's the most unenviable job that anyone could have at the moment, and it could be the reason why she hasn't been toppled, because no one else wants to be in that position, surely.
I think that's a fair point. Do you know, Greg, as I watched Boris Johnson's resignation speech, I remember something you said on The Pledge some weeks ago, that none of the real Brexiters have ever sold a vision. They've never told us where we're going to go. And I've been struck by that by Mrs May, and I was struck again by Boris Johnson. We still haven't had any, and that's what I'm saying. Get some, and indeed it's reported that she's going on a nationwide tour where she wants to reconnect with the... She's got to sell a vision, doesn't she?
Well, it's a very strange thing for me to say, but I have some sympathy with her, actually. I came to the conclusion this week, she has got a job that you can't do. It's not doable.
No, you can't do it.
It's not doable. Therefore, there is no solution she could come up with that is going to get through the House of Commons. Just, there isn't one. And therefore...
Where does that leave us, Greg?
A second vote.
Well, where does it leave us? I mean, in the end, the choice is going to be, I suspect, no Brexit or crash out.
No Brexit won't go down well, Greg.
No, well, neither will crashing out, let me tell you. And I think that's probably why I agree with you. In the end, you'll have some sort of second vote, because you won't get either of those to the House of Commons as it sits. So either you go to a general election, in which case you'll get Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party, I suspect, because, you know, you see the swing against the Tories this week is enormous, isn't it? You know. Or you've got to have another vote. You either have a general election or another vote.
Michelle?
Well, as I say, Parliament won't be able to decide.
Yeah, but
because there's not a majority.
Another vote for what? You want to redo the Brexit referendum?
No, I think you say to them, look, this is where we've got to. We can't decide. You decide. You can have another vote on either crashing out or we remain in.
Shall we... Look, you've mentioned Boris Johnson's speech. Shall we have a quick look at some of the things that he said?
Let us, again, aim explicitly for that glorious vision
of Lancaster House, a strong, independent, self-governing Britain that is genuinely open to the world, not the miserable, permanent limbo of Chequers.
See, you've mentioned as well a swing away from the Tories, and when you look at where a lot of that swing is going to, it's going towards UKIP, which to me reinforces the fact that most Brexiteers, certainly every Brexiteer that I've ever spoken to, doesn't regret their vote. They've not sat here now and gone, oh, if only I could rewind time back to 2 years, I would have voted differently. I actually think people's resolve has gotten stronger in favour of Brexit recently. I
don't think the polls show that.
Well,
it's not a massive shift, but I don't think the polls show that.
Afua, let's get you in on this. There was a fantastic piece written by a former speechwriter for David Cameron, Claire Foges, in one of the papers, in which she talked about, and I actually agree with this, it doesn't matter whether you supported Tony Blair, but he could sell a vision, whether you supported Margaret Thatcher, she could. David Cameron, you know where I'm going. I don't actually agree with what Boris Johnson says. I don't think there's ever been a vision, Lancaster Gate or anywhere else, from Mrs May as regards this. What do you say?
I mean, I agree. I think I've said this so many times on the show, we are lacking leadership. We're lacking leadership that's credible, that people can really get behind. That's why Corbyn did well, but on this, he's also weak. And I think, you know, the only person who seems to have a vision at the moment, and I hate to say it, is Jacob Rees-Mogg, and that's why he is essentially running the show.
That's a good point.
He is running the show, and this is not representative either of voters or of Parliament. There is a small, hardcore group of Brexiteer hardliners who've hijacked this process, and I also feel sorry for Theresa May. She's being held hostage by them. I don't personally think she's managed it brilliantly, but it is a difficult situation. But I think we all need to take a step back and rationally appraise the situation. The vision of Jacob Rees-Mogg is not a vision we all need to or have agreed to sign up to, and I think that's clearly evident in the House of Commons. Look at the body language of MPs when Boris Johnson was speaking. He surrounded himself by this hardcore group of Brexiteers, but the majority of the House have lost any credibility that he once had as being shot. And they are equally disillusioned by what's happening. I just want to quickly show you, when that vote was won this week, the reaction of MPs, because everything is on a knife edge right now.
The ayes to the right, 305. The noes to the left, 302.
The atmosphere is so unpredictable and tense, and nobody knows which way anything is going. And that is not a way to run policy, but it's certainly not a way to conduct negotiations. We cannot achieve anything.
Majid, a good point. Just come to you in a minute, but good point Afua makes about Rees-Mogg has got a vision. I doubt that you buy into it, but that's probably why he's getting so much attention.
I think it's worth noting, by the way, two Lib Dem leader and former Lib Dem leader missed that.
That was
yes.
Yes, on the issue of Jacob Rees-Mogg and vision, of course, Anna Soubry has been opposing Rees-Mogg and has her own vision. Let's listen to what she had to say.
Nobody voted to be poorer, and nobody voted leave on the basis that somebody with a gold-plated pension and inherited wealth would take their job away from them.
Preach, sister.
That's powerful. So I just want to say at this stage,
you don't need an opposition, do you? They do it themselves.
I think we've got to a stage where, and it's also in response to what you were saying, Michelle, I think we've got to a stage where it doesn't matter how passionately we feel about Remain or Brexit. It actually is right now down to what the practical way forward is. And actually, practically, I don't see any way forward, because you can be, or you or anyone, can be so passionate for wanting Brexit, and you've got some Remainiacs out there as well who are almost like militant in there. But it doesn't mean anything, because it won't. Whatever we propose will not get through.
So it's a no deal.
Well, so it's what Greg.
It's what Greg said.
Yeah, it's going to either be no deal or we stay in, and it's going to have to either be a vote in Parliament or a vote by the people. It's the only practical way forward.
But I think there's a huge appetite now, and I know you will all disagree with me probably, but there is an appetite now for almost like a Trump-style negotiation,
But that's no deal.
But more, yeah, but that's what I'm saying, and I think there's
but they'll say, fine, we'll have no deal.
Yeah.
What would Trump achieve, though? What does that achieve in a negotiation as delicately poised?
But I think that you can't go into a negotiation if you're not truly willing to walk away. I think how, you know, I mean, you've done business deals and negotiations your whole life. How can you go into a negotiation if you're truly not able to say, do you know what?
But hang on.
We need to leave.
This negotiation, you haven't got anywhere to go. You've only got no deal. That's your only negotiation. Last week, when we discussed this...
Do you think no deal would be terrible?
I think the danger is too great. But I'd be interested in what Nick thinks, because last week you said you thought no deal would be a disaster, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I think the pound took a hell of a hammer.
Yeah, you're someone who voted.
Temporarily.
You're someone who voted out. Would you change your vote if it was a no-deal choice?
No, I was a reluctant Brexiteer, and I'm still a reluctant Brexiteer. And if it is no deal, so be a no deal. And I think we just got to batten down the hatches for the pound.
But surely this is the difference between your scenario, Michelle, of a business negotiation. The difference for me with this and a business negotiation is that the stakes in this are the economic prosperity of the nation. You know, you can't just walk away from something that could mean jobs, the currency, investment, a mainstay of the economy. It's just not something you can just kind of throw up in the air.
But I believe there was always going to be the risk of a short to medium term effect of this, and I still stand by that. But I don't believe that long term. So you talk about currency crashing.
Yes.
Of course, there is a strong possibility that that would happen, but I think that would be a short term situation that would resolve itself. And I've got to say, Boris Johnson is, for me, the only person that's ever had any consistent positivity in terms of having faith in ourselves and what we could create and what that would look like.
That's all bull.
Did you read his
this is a man who chose at the last moment which way he was going to go. He didn't have a vision. It was all about Boris.
But why is having faith and positivity in your country BS?
He doesn't have faith.
Because he has faith in himself. He has faith and positivity about Boris Johnson. No one else.
Do you have positivity? You was like me. You was on the fence and then you swung Brexit. You was very similar to me. Yeah, but do you have faith that actually everything could be OK in the long term?
It's going to be far more difficult than I think it was, but I do think Britain will probably pull itself through, yes.
Right, well, channeling Trump still. It was a fascinating coincidence this week that just after Donald Trump was decrying the sad changes that immigration has brought to Europe, the descendants of immigrants were showing just how dependent nations like France, Belgium and, yes, England are on their contribution. It's an inconvenient fact that 15 members of the World Cup winning French team are of African heritage. So are half of the Belgian team, while 11 members of the England side are black or mixed race. It's obvious that immigrants have not weakened European culture, they have improved it. And I'm happy to see Brexiteers like Michael Gove now expressing regret for the way the Leave campaign could be seen as having stoked racially loaded fears about immigration during the referendum. But the reality is France, while enjoying the glory that immigrants bring, has for years been treating them like crap. And so have we. It's time to accept immigration is not a dirty word. It has enriched us all, and we all benefit from it.
So if we say that Brexit, if we kind of agree that Brexit has divided people a lot, I would say that the World Cup has significantly reunited us. And I watched every England game in the pub, obviously, and I took great joy in seeing everybody came together, everybody. It didn't matter their race, their religion, their age, the colour of their skin, nothing mattered. Everybody had this common purpose. Everyone was united.
Not the Scots.
Everybody seemed happy. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. I really did. And there is a graphic which will pop onto the screen now that would show you what the English team would look like if it wasn't for immigration. And I find that really powerful. And I know that yeah, it would be down to 5 without immigration. So I do think that we've got an opportunity to capitalise upon the positive sense of being united at the moment. And I would like to see, I don't know how we do it, but I would like to see that bottled and taken forward. And of course, I know that there are some people that are racist and stupid, and I know that you're going to bring in something that shocked me to the core to think that there's people... In fact, should we go to that?
Well, we can if you want to, if you finished your...
yeah, because I want to... Yeah, I want to...
Yeah, please.
Well, I mean, I think just to pick up on that and just give a bit of context, I think that you're right in what you said, that it has great potential to unite people. I worry for 2 reasons. One is 1998, France already won under Zinedine Zidane, of Algerian descent, French-born, and yet the problems in France weren't addressed. They continued unabated. Segregation and discrimination in France, I think, is probably worse than here.
I agree.
And I think actually in all of Europe, Britain's probably the better place to be. Yet, even here, people are feeling increasingly emboldened to speak like this. And this is actually very interesting because it's the one week I wasn't on my show and Kevin stood in for me, and this is what he had to deal with.
I totally disapprove of the multiracial society. The England football team doesn't represent me at all. In fact, it represents everything that I'm against.
Oh, I'm sorry you're missing out and being such a stick in the mud, Ian. We're a migrant country. The French Huguenots, Romans, German tribes, Irish.
You're quite right. They were all white people. If you think
is that your issue?
Tribes that you're talking about.
That's your issue?
Well, of course.
Do you want England to lose today?
Yes.
What, because you're so obsessed by race and your bigotry and your prejudice is so poisonous, you want England to lose?
Yeah, I just hate seeing my country destroyed by multiracialism.
So I've had people... So I was asked, would he have said that if you were on air and it was because it's my show, and would he have said that to me directly? I have had people say that to me on air. Completely unabashed, unembarrassed of their bigotry. And so just to conclude, I think there are people that feel emboldened. We do need to definitely capitalise on this and turn it into something. France failed to do that.
Do you know how, though? Because
the second thing very quickly, the last point I say, is there is a danger that it's just reflected in sport. I also want to see that kind of diversity across all sectors, and increasingly so. We are getting there in Britain, but there is a danger if it's only in sport that, of course, it reinforces also certain stereotypes.
I think, and just before bringing the others in, I agree with you, Michelle, and I think that it is sport.
Have that on tape.
Sport, we agree on this, and it's good to hear you as well, kind of talking about how unifying that moment is, because that's what sport can do. And I agree with Majid as well that this is useful if you can capitalise on it to change perceptions. And for me, what I would like to see is this cognitive dissonance between us embracing, for example, the contribution that black people and mixed-race British people are making to football with wider attitudes. So 1/4 of British people currently admit to being racist. This is people self-defining in a poll last year. And there's loads of evidence. We've had conversations on the show before that we have these problems. In France, Macron has just decided to abolish race from the constitution. That might sound like a progressive move, but what it does is mean you can no longer measure the impact of race discrimination because you're denying that it exists as a concept, when France has terrible problems with racism and discrimination. So for me, the way to move forward is to take this and say, how can we actually be honest about the problems we have in society?
France has always done that.
Not dig our heads in the sand.
Macron's decision was that he refused to reconsider the policy they've always had, and it's always been that policy.
If you go back, I mean, there's an interesting quote from Jean-Marie Le Pen back in '96 when he said, after France had been knocked out the Euros, he said it's artificial to bring foreign players here and baptise them baptise the French team, though I could think of other names for them. They put an Algerian in to please the Arabs, a Kanak who can't even sing the national anthem, blacks to satisfy the Antilles. None of them has any place in a French team. Now, if you then looked at what happened in the Champs-Élysées on Sunday night, you'd have thought, forget, Now, I agree, it was such a massive celebration. Now, I agree with you, whether that has a long-term impact on France, I don't know. I don't know. I've always thought that France is a more racist society than
well, the film
Ennis.
It's a great film that depicts a lot of life in the suburbs in France. France and Paris is a lot more segregated than London.
Can I just play some of your words back to you, Afra? I can't remember whether it was immigration or immigrants were being treated as a dirty word.
I thought immigration.
Immigration as a dirty word. Just expand on that. What do you mean?
Well, we've seen...
if you do Windrush, come on, we all know. That was horrific.
I'm not. I mean, Windrush, we
was
talk
horrific.
about it, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
So I remember within, I don't know, the last 5-10 years, immigration being accepted as a problem per se, being something that only the far right said, to now it being all the mainstream parties, with the exception of Liberal Democrats, saying that immigration is a problem.
But uncontrolled immigration is a problem, right?
But nobody advocates uncontrolled immigration.
OK, so it has to be controlled.
Yes, but you see, what we've seen is going from talking about policies about immigration to how people who are perceived as being descended from immigration are treated in this country.
Your introduction to our conversation should have had the word uncontrolled in front of immigration, because immigration isn't a dirty word. Uncontrolled immigration.
But that's my whole point, Nick. People don't discriminate or distinguish. They treat immigration as a problem, and they treat people who look visibly like they're descended from immigrants as a problem. And they're not distinguishing.
The figures we came up with just now, was that 25% of people identified themselves as racist. That means 75% don't. That means 75% don't.
back.
Now, I don't think
but that
that's
is
where
good,
I don't think
though.
that's where we were 20 odd years ago.
No, 20 years ago,
and I think
it would have been the other way around.
And I think sport has changed it because I mean, I remember going to Chelsea in the days when they used to boo black players and throw bananas on the pitch. And suddenly they realised that their best players were black players.
Can I just following on from what Nick's saying? This is from Romelu Lukaku, who's a Belgian striker, and he said this, and this reminds me of something that happened in Britain as well. He said when things were going well, he's talking about for him, I was reading newspaper articles and they were calling me Romelu Lukaku, the Belgian striker. When things weren't going well, they were calling me Romelu Lukaku, the Belgian striker of Congolese descent. If you don't like the way I play, that's fine, but I was born here, I'm Belgian. And you know what that reminds me of? Mo Farah, who's our great British hero. As soon as there was a controversy about his coach, he suddenly became Somali-born Mo Farah. We do that. It's in our subconscious.
Do you know the racial origin of all the English players?
No, because they're British.
Yes,
they're British.
Exactly. That's what I mean. I don't think anyone knows.
That's
I mean, a lot of them are mixed race, which I mean, you know, the largest growing minority group in Britain, or ethnic minority group, is mixed race. A lot of them are mixed race.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I know which teams they play for, and I have no idea what their
like there was, for example,
origins.
I read a study about Jessica Ennis and Mo Farah, right? They both have African heritage, right?
Oh, right, I didn't know.
Jess Ennis's father is of Jamaican heritage. Yeah. So it was really interesting that when Jess Ennis is described in the press, she's always talked about as Sheffield girl, which makes her sound very English and kind of. Mo Farah is always talked about as of Somali heritage, even though he's always British. And the way that
like one of these students at Manchester University. You're seeing slight where there is.
I know what you were talking about on the radio. It reinforces these perceptions about immigrants being something that is bad.
The reaction to the Windrush scandal was heartening, though, because actually everyone was agreed.
I think Sajid Javid played a blinder.
And so there is hope. I want to say that when I was, I'm slightly older than you, I think, when I was young, we would have to leave games 15 minutes before the final whistle because we would be beaten up by our own fans if we were seen in the...
What team was that?
Of your skin color,
yeah, because so basically...
Which team was that?
Mainly the East London teams, right? So you're West Ham, and of course Millwall and all of that. Okay. I grew up in Essex, and it was a terrible thing that no...
Growing up in Essex is a terrible thing.
And this is, I'm talking before the murder of Stephen Lawrence, right? No person of colour would want to be seen in the stadium 15 minutes prior to the final whistle. A lot of that has changed, and it's important to acknowledge that in the game, but also in the country. Because then, of course, when we acknowledge where progress has been made, and I think perhaps it is befitting to say that Britain is still, out of all of the European countries, the best place to be for people of colour and minorities. It genuinely is. But then, of course, there's a lot more to do as well. But I think it is important to acknowledge where progress is made, because then people take us seriously when we point to things that do need to be improved.
But then Afua, I just said to you, when we said 3/4 of people were not racist, and I said, don't you think that's a good thing? And you said, no. To me, it is a really good thing. A significant majority of people
I think we spend a lot of time self-congratulating. In fact, when I wrote my books on this topic, and I was told...
You were in a book?
I was told that one reason people were hostile to me is because I didn't spend enough time praising Britain for how far we'd come from the days when people got beaten up every day because of the colour of their skin. Now, look, we have progressed, and I haven't experienced a world in which I get beaten up because I'm black, and that's good. But I don't feel like celebrating that when there are still people being deported because of their skin colour, when 1/4 of people still self-define as racist, when 1/3 of people of black heritage experience discrimination at work. Why should we all stop and celebrate that? If you're the person who's experiencing it, the fact that 75% of people don't perpetuate that behaviour doesn't help you.
And it's interesting because we're talking about inequality, and there could be an even bigger rift developing between the human race, and that is because an inquiry into ethical issues around genetically altering a human embryo has found, to quote them, there's no absolute reason not to pursue it if appropriate measures exist before it becomes UK law. But this is, of course, attracting controversy over concerns it's opening the door to designer babies. Heritable genome editing, currently largely prohibited by UK law, could be used to wipe out genetic diseases by deleting or permanently changing code in embryos or the sperm and egg. The most controversial aspect, however, concerns the potential to introduce changes to the germline, permanent DNA alterations that would pass down the generations. Advances in science have a long history of raising the spectre of mad scientists seeking to create their very own Frankenstein. It is wrong to discourage scientists due to fearing caricatures. But though science must march on, it is impossible to ignore the dangers in creating a superior race of GM human beings, or superhumans, if you will. Ethical issues aside, the political consequences of this alone are grave. If proceed we must, then it is with the gravest of caution that we should go.
I'm glad you raised this topic, Majid, because it's fascinating.
It is genuinely fascinating.
And I actually find myself in a bit of a bind about it. I'm a progressive person, so I'm not somebody to say we should stop science because we're scared something unethical might happen.
Yeah.
However, I think for me there are kind of two broad issues. So one, I think when you're talking about therapeutic purposes like curing disease, I think there is a really, really strong case that we should be furthering these technological advances. I mean, it's incredible what can be done. The issue for me is safety, because there's still lots of unknowns about this. So the two I know about, there's one called off-target edits, where you get it wrong, basically, and there's another about mosaicism, where you edit the gene in one place, but other places aren't edited, and you don't know what's going to happen when they all get patched together. That's one. And then looking at non-therapeutic purposes, that's where it gets really ethically murky for me, because we can see a world where rich people are going to start designing the genes they want for their children.
And altering the future germ.
And the thing about the germline is altering future generations. Now, the issue for me is how can a parent give informed consent not knowing what the effects on their children, grandchildren, because we don't know, we can't know what the long-term effects through generations will be. And so I find it really difficult to see why two people now, or one person now, could give consent to something having no idea how it could affect future generations.
Apparently,
that is so problematic.
We will acquire this technology in around 20 years without the mistakes that currently could happen with the unedited or the false editing, which can cause cancer. But all of that technology will, within 20 years, get to a point where this can actually be done.
There's an interesting quote from which convinced me, I think, from Marcy Darnowski, who is the Executive Director of the Centre for Genetics and Society, who just said, the bottom line is that the Nuttall report, which has suggested this, rolls out the red carpet for a future in which the children of elites who can afford purported genetic upgrades are treated as superior to the rest of us. A society of genetics haves and genetic have-nots. We need meaningful public empowerment on decisions about whether a world of genetically modified children is one we want at all.
Sounds scary, doesn't it?
It does sound scary. The interesting question is it going to happen anyway?
I think so.
That it'll happen, that there will be a society
that's why I
where
said
this thing will be allowed to happen.
Well, it will happen.
People will just go to that.
Well, because Putin's not going to give a damn. He'll do it, and I think it will begin with military experimentation.
Well, OK, so which leads me into my question, because I sense you're more genned up on this than I am. How does this differ from what the Nazis did with eugenics? Or it doesn't differ from...
Well, the Nazis tried to do it through breeding, right, and extermination.
Well, and extermination of
this is through design, but the end goal is, if it's misused, the end goal would be the same.
So, children with what's known as Down syndrome, would they be screened out?
Well, you just remove the gene.
I mean, there is already a certain amount of selection, because they offer you they offer you the option of aborting a baby.
Which is 100%.
That's the less controversial element, on the worst end. On the worst end of it, you could start saying, OK, if we can, which is the germline debate, if we can start altering all future generations, I want to create a species of human beings that are stronger, faster, smarter,
disease-free is what I took from what you said.
But also from their DNA sequence will be taller, smarter, which is what Hitler's vision was, right?
But if you believe that, if you believe that it is inevitable,
well, somebody's going to do it.
Do you control?
Well,
how do you control it?
It is about... So, as I've spoken about before, I was recently considering getting a sperm donor. And then I started to think, when I started to think about my child, what attributes would I have liked the donor to have and all the rest of it. And I found myself getting slightly carried away, and I had to stop and have a word with myself, because I was almost sitting there going, well, I want them to be like this, like this, like this, like that. I don't want that, I want this. And then I was going, all right, and I only want to have a girl. And then one of my friends had to say to me, Michelle, like, what you really want is ideally a healthy child. And it really... It stopped me, because I had got carried away with all of these characteristics that I wanted and the ones that I wanted to be screened out, and I felt quite guilty. But then on the other hand, the other side of it was me kind of saying, well, why shouldn't I be allowed that choice? Why shouldn't I?
I mean, that's nothing... Do you know Mary Stopes disinherited her son because he married a woman who wore glasses? That's the level of eugenicism that she was promoting. Can I just because you raised Down syndrome, I just want to show you this, because I think it's a bit problematic, but it shows just how people feel, which I understand the concerns that people have about this technology.
When you start to say that certain people should exist and other people should not exist, it really opens up a whole kettle of fish. What you're saying and what you will be indirectly saying to people who actually do exist right now with these genetic disorders is that they should not have been brought into existence. So that kind of message to these people who have already these disorders can be seen as very negative and even actually very disturbing, because the message being given is that they should not be around.
I mean, obviously, this is completely different to doing anything to people who are already alive and have certain conditions. But I can understand the messaging, which is and it goes to the therapeutic and non-therapeutic, the idea that it's desirable to create people who are perfect rather than accepting that part of humanity.
Has anyone here seen District 9, the film?
No.
So it kind of envisions a future based in South Africa, but, you know, I think that's just more poetic, but it envisions a future where this happens and you have two species of human beings. And I genuinely worry, because actually the kinds of controls, whatever controls the Nuffield Council, and I'll show you something they said, but whatever controls we put in place here, you know, as I say, the North Koreas of this world or the Putins of this world won't give a damn for those controls. And if it's going to happen anyway...
And what's the conclusion of that film? What happens in the end? Presumably there's a world war.
Yeah, there's a huge war that erupts. But of course, the thing is that the problem is that if it does lead to a point where you've got smarter, faster, stronger human beings and the poorer people that can't afford that, of course, the technology will be on the side of the faster, smarter ones.
Can we get them ready for the next World Cup? Is that pushing
yeah, that's the one. Well, it'll start with the armed forces, I tell you.
I'm up next, and there's no reason why I wouldn't be. I mean, no reason why I would be. I mean, there's no reason why I wouldn't be talking about President Trump. Donald Trump scored the biggest own goal of his life this week when he sided with President Putin against his own intelligence agencies, saying there was no evidence the Russian state tried to interfere with the US election in 2016. If Trump ends up being impeached for collusion between his campaign and Russia, and the evidence against him is growing, he will look back at what he said this week as a fatal mistake. When even his right-wing supporters, including Fox News, are accusing him of being a traitor and betraying his nation, you know it's serious. I've long felt that Donald Trump is a threat to Western security, and it's now beyond doubt after he decided President Putin is more trustworthy than the FBI or the CIA. Suddenly, the odds on Trump surviving for all 4 years are dramatically reduced. His days could well be numbered, and rightly so. The sooner this dangerous demagogue is out of the White House, the better for all of us.
I can't imagine there's anyone on the planet who hasn't seen it, but it's worth taking a look at, or for just to refresh viewers' memories. Here's a little bit of the president supposedly in action, or should that be inaction?
My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be. I realize that there is a need for some clarification. It should have been obvious. I thought it would be obvious, but I would like to clarify just in case it wasn't. In a key sentence in my remarks, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't, or why it wouldn't be Russia.
So I would sanction the bombing of Russia. Damn, that was meant a bit late, Mr. President. I wouldn't sanction the bombing of Russia. Let's pick up on a couple of things you said. Greg, you said you think he might look back one day and see it as a fatal mistake. I don't think this man has any self-awareness or self-doubt at all. He will think he was right. I think he's almost blaming it already on fake news, so it's probably our fault that he got the words wrong. And secondly, you talked about his chances of staying being dramatically reduced. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I think there is such a body of opinion or such a world of support for him there. But to support what you say, Chuck Schumer, who's the Democratic, I stress that because it's the other party, minority leader. In the entire history of our country, Americans have never seen a president of the US support an American adversary the way President Trump has supported President Putin. Greg, I still don't think it's enough.
Well, look, it's not enough yet. I mean, take a look at the New York Daily News front page. It's wonderful.
Oh, I saw that.
Open treason. And I've got here, and I was going to give it to you, but you're on my side, so I shan't, my Putin picked Trump badge, which is...
Isn't it?
You know, and it is... if it wasn't so serious, it would be funny.
Well, it's both. And,
it is both.
But if you go back to the peak of the Reagan era and the Star Wars and the Cold War and Thatcher as Prime Minister, and of course, you know, you remember that whole period and Russia was the bad guy. Imagine Reagan going over to Russia and then suddenly declaring that he believes the Russians over his own intelligence agencies about the threat of
Well,
the
of course,
Cold War.
he didn't really say that. Now he says he didn't.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's now... I mean, that's even more scary. He's now the guy who's going to push the button and said, "I'll push the, you know, let's push the nuclear button."
Yeah.
Oh, no, I mean, don't push the nuclear button.
Yeah, well, so, and if there's one area on which Trump has actually damaged his own supporters, and the Republicans in this case, it would be on national security. I mean, historically, they have been the party that is always concerned about Russia and its machinations. And if you look at some remarks from some of his own supporters, let's have a look at them. Republican grandee and Trump supporter, Newt Gingrich. I mean, Newt Gingrich, of all people, he's tweeted, "President Trump must clarify his statements in Helsinki on our intelligence system and Putin. It is the most serious mistake of his presidency and must be corrected immediately." Monday's joint press conference was a personal and national embarrassment. That's from the usually supportive Wall Street Journal. Trump's made a very big mistake here. The optics are bad. That's from White House Director of Communications, former Scaramucci. And I'd say it's a lot more than the optics that were bad here.
Do you think he'll go then? You think... Sorry, Michelle, excuse me, one last question.
You can't be sure, but I
genuinely think...
You remember a long time ago we talked about Watergate and you wanted me to explain what Watergate was about, because I'm old enough to have
This is Woodgate, by the way. This is Woodgate.
It came because bit by bit by bit by bit the case was made, and I think this.
But there was a crime at the heart of it, Greg.
Well, I think there's a crime at the heart of this, and I think that's what the special prosecutor is going to come up with.
Maybe.
If the special prosecutor comes up with evidence, I mean, at its worst, I mean, I was reading stuff. The worst case scenario is that Trump and his people helped the Russians undermine the democratic process in 2016 to enable Trump to win. Now, if that's what they come out and say, then he's toast.
OK, listen, the impeachment... the impeachment shall be, or president shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery or other high crimes or misdemeanours. I still think
there is another way of getting rid of him, and that if the majority of his cabinet say he's no longer fit for office.
Well, Trump's clarification made me laugh. And to continue the laugh, should we look at what the former governor of California had to say?
President Trump, I just saw your press conference with President Putin, and it was embarrassing. I mean, you stood there like a little wet noodle, like a little fanboy. I mean, I was asking myself, when are you going to ask him for an autograph or for a selfie or something like that? I mean, you literally sold out at this press conference our intelligence community, our justice system, and worst of all, our country. You're the President of the United States. You shouldn't do that.
I just absolutely exactly when he called him a little wet noodle. I wonder if Donald Trump will care about the fact that Schwarzenegger's just called him a little wet noodle.
I don't think he will, but I think the issue for me, and what's fascinating, is that the core heartland of people who support Trump are these very patriotic Americans.
Yes.
Who are very proud of their institution and very fiercely defending national security. And that's why this is weird, because you don't go and embarrass and humiliate your own intelligence community, and you don't go and sidle up to what Americans perceive to be. And I actually think that it's often very simplistic the way they see Putin as this kind of like cartoon character baddie, but never mind, that's how they see him. And that's who Trump's support base is. So it's very weird. I think, you know, this has consequences for us as well. And this is the German foreign minister speaking last week, Heiko Maas, who said, we, and he's speaking about Germany, can no longer completely rely on the White House. I mean, that seems like an understatement. To maintain our partnership with the USA, say we must readjust it. The first clear consequence can only be that we need to align ourselves even more closely in Europe. And I fear for us, I feel that we're very alone right now. We are trying to leave Europe. We're trying to cozy up with a completely nutty American president who's busy trashing his own institutions. And where does that leave us? It's a scary time for us to be
well,
in an
imagine he makes a trade deal with us and it's actually, sorry, I didn't mean to make that.
No trade.
What is really bizarre about it is the evidence against him and the relationship with Russia is piling up in America. There's a number of court cases that are going to come up quite soon. Paul Manafort is currently in jail. He was the guy who spent 10 years in Russia and was chairman of his campaign. If Manafort goes native and goes rogue and decides he'll do a deal, I think Trump is toast. But what is interesting is, with all that happening, why on earth would you go and say that out there? You could have just said, well, this is what President Putin says, and my intelligence agencies say different, and we disagree on that. That's all he had to say.
But that instead, I'd love to know what he talks about there. Wouldn't you? Behind those closed doors. I'd absolutely be
I did tweet hashtag Woodgate, but I realised that by tomorrow I'm going to have to correct that and say, sorry, I meant hashtag Woodgate.
Yeah, you do. Right, you're watching The Pledge on Sky News, and coming up, why I'm against forcing people to be veggie at work. I'm all for companies doing their best to be a force for good, and I applaud efforts companies like Sky and many others have made when it comes to initiatives like removing plastic. However, a certain company seems to be taking their quest for good a little far. WeWork, a co-working company with some 200,000 members and 6,000 staff, have decided to ban meat. Yes, from now on, citing environmental reasons, they will no longer be providing meat at any events and will not pay for meat in employee expenses. Sure, serve me my drink in a non-disposable cup, give me recycled hand towels and metal cutlery, but telling me what to eat? Sorry, WeWork, but for me, that wouldn't work.
Yeah, there's a moment, I agree with you. There's a moment when you say, hang on, I'm an individual, I'm entitled to make these decisions for myself. I mean, I live with someone who doesn't eat meat at all. Increasingly, my kids don't eat meat. Increasingly, I feel like a pariah to sit and sort of get a steak and cook it for myself. And I do feel that there's a fundamental change coming on. But I agree with you. I don't think someone should say to you, no, you can't have this. I'm your employer. You can't have this.
Yeah, I think it's terrible.
But to be fair, what they do say, I'll show you what they do say is they say that this policy will save more than 445 million pounds of carbon dioxide emissions, 16.6 billion gallons of water, and more than 15.5 million animals. Now, I don't quite get the third one. I mean, those animals won't be born if they're not going to be eaten, because that's why they're bred. But we're always, governments, companies, and everybody. You're always weighing up, aren't you, the rights of the individual versus what you consider for the good of society.
You're involved in businesses. Would you ever tell your employees you can't eat meat, or I won't pay for meat and expenses?
No, but I think they're perfectly entitled to say when we're organising an event.
Yeah.
For our staff, we don't supply meat. I think that's perfectly valid.
I think you're being unfair. I mean, that's what they're doing. So they're not saying if you work for us, you are never allowed to eat meat.
They won't pay for it.
They're saying we will not use our money to pay for you to eat meat.
Isn't that discrimination?
A business is entitled to decide what its expenses policy is going to be. I mean, you're lucky you get lunch on expenses.
Yeah, but isn't it
How many
discrimination
positions do that? It's not religious or ethnic group, is it?
It's still discrimination.
You are of the liberal left.
I am. I'm not saying we should, but the government should ban meat eating. Oh, please. This is a private company.
Listen to me. How can you tolerate such intolerance?
It's not intolerance.
It is.
It's a
It's
company
intolerant of
saying
somebody who likes a steak or a chicken or a lamb.
There is no right to have lunches on expenses paid for by your employer.
What gives you...
That's something that
No, there's a right to be treated equally. That's
yes,
what
they're treating all their staff equally.
No, they're not.
They are. They're saying you all can't eat meat on expenses.
I ran a company like that where they used to joke about us being an equal opportunity employer because we treated everybody equally badly.
Yeah, fair enough. It's not my ideal employer, but how is that going to impact different groups disproportionately?
Look, I'll tell you how it's going to impact.
Which is what discrimination.
Let me use a language that I think you will understand, right? There are, indeed. There are, look, this works.
Don't even try.
This works in countries where pescatarianism and vegetarianism has become a cultural phenomenon. This chap, the founder of this company, sitting in his Silicon Valley home, he's about to build a multi-million-dollar mansion on a mountaintop in Utah. You know,
these
he
people
can have
buying big
sushi
houses
flown into him, right? And on a carbon footprint, by the way, in that mountaintop, he's going to have sushi flown into him and have all these vegetables flown in. Meanwhile, I imagine he operates in Mexico. I imagine he operates in, you know, less well-developed countries where culturally and financially they cannot afford the sort of diet that he, on his high mountain, is pontificating over. And therefore, it is a level, to use your language, it's a level of Western cultural colonization and imperialism.
Nice
That's
try.
what it is.
Nice try.
It's true.
The point is, WeWork is paying for the food. This isn't about...
No, it's discrimination.
No, because when they go home, they can still buy whatever they want.
There's got to be a difference between...
They're not paying themselves.
There's got to be a
difference.
The company is paying.
So if they can't afford meat,
there's got to be a difference between the company picnic, when the company is entitled to provide whatever food it wants to provide, and, say, expenses. Someone's flown somewhere, has gone out for dinner. Surely they're entitled to choose what they want to eat.
Of course.
I mean, I don't know where you all work. I don't work somewhere where people pay for me to go and have dinner. So that's a luxury as far as I'm
concerned. You've never expensed a meal?
Yeah, but
The Guardian.
have you been to The Guardian?
No, I try to avoid it.
The Guardian, don't get me started.
Right, hold on, we need to...
I mean, I don't...
I mean, it's just talking nonsense. We've all had experience on expense. Right, let's just clarify.
I was to be really balanced on this topic, by the way, but you're all being so unreasonable.
You seem to...
Hang on, we just need to clarify. We just need to clarify. We do not know the provenance of the sushi enjoyed by this particular gentleman or how it's supplied, so we just want to make that aware. And we need to see what the WeWork co-founder, Miguel McKelvey, says about this. Quotes, new research indicates that avoiding meat is one of the biggest things an individual can do to reduce their personal environmental impact, even more than switching to a hybrid car. This policy only applies to events paid for by WeWork. Members and employees are welcome to bring in meat for meals, and members are welcome to serve meat at events they host. Well, I know what I'm doing. I'm setting up a barbecue in the car park. They
have an annual festival, right? Members' festival. It's £309 for a ticket. And you go along, there's music and there's food included. If I go to a festival, I want a cheeseburger and chips. When I get there, that's my lunch of choice.
Well, that sounds like cultural imperialism to imagine, because if you go to Japan, they won't be giving you...
When did
I
they've made it perfectly clear to you that you're not going to get that, so you won't pay
the... You know what? I would
expect them. Yes, do what you like. I don't care. But don't tell a bloke or a woman if they've spent all day flying halfway around the world, they can't have a bacon sandwich.
To retreat a bit from my hyperbole, it is true that meat eating leaves a huge impact on the environment. I acknowledge...
I've got some stats for you.
I've
got some stats.
And actually,
let me give you the stats.
I want to acknowledge the mea culpa. I want to acknowledge that actually, as a meat eater, I am more responsible than a vegetarian or a pescatarian for damage to the
Let me just give you the stats.
I wish I didn't eat meat, but I can't stop eating it.
18% of calories consumed come from meat and dairy. So 18% of our calories, but 83% of farmland and 60% of agriculture's greenhouse gases.
Do you know what?
The problem with that for me, and I'm not vegan now, but I was vegan for years, and I was a raw food vegan as well.
What are you now?
I am now mainly vegan, but I occasionally not.
I bet you were cheap date, though, weren't you?
It's not cheap. It's very expensive, which is one issue I do have, and I kind of agree with you on that. And also, things like nuts require a huge amount of water, so the idea that kind of nut milks instead of dairy milk is really environmentally friendly. And as you know, as someone who ate a lot of soy when I was vegan, that also can contribute to the destruction of farmland.
And if we all stop eating beef, cows will die out.
It's not ideal, but I think we need to be thinking a lot more conscientiously.
But that's true, isn't it? If we stopped eating beef, cows would actually become extinct.
They wouldn't become extinct.
Yeah, because they can't survive alone.
When we invented the car, horses didn't become extinct. We just have far fewer.
We still breed horses for racing.
There are far fewer horses than there were.
We don't breed cows for racing. You won't need cows for racing on tracks.
I wouldn't have a problem with WeWork hosting afternoon lunchtime sessions where they try to educate people about about veganism or vegetarianism. I don't have a problem if you want to educate people into that and allow you to make a choice, fine. But telling people, no, you can't eat that.
On our money.
No, so, OK, so if I take a client out for dinner, so I'm trying to get a wine and diner landlord because I want to do a business deal with him, and we go to a restaurant and he wants a lasagna. Well, have I got to pay for his lasagna? Because or do I have to say to my client,
tell him, I can't
you can't.
Oh, how absurd.
I
can't get you lasagna.
It's like if I still work for The Guardian, which I don't anymore, I would have to explain something. I took them out. I can't order you champagne and expense it.
Do you know, we've had some bizarre debates over the last 2 years, but this has to be... if it wasn't for you, Afua, who would defend them?
This is so obvious to me. And Michelle, I knew this debate was coming when you tweeted a picture. Michelle tweeted a picture of a vegetarian sausage she was eating, and you know what? There are good vegetarian sausages,
let me explain.
and there are bad vegetarian
and then I'll tell you
sausages.
some other stuff that companies are doing that is good. But I got on a train, and for the first time in my life, I thought I'm going to go for the veggie option.
That was a bad idea.
I got a sausage and some potatoes. Yeah, I took a picture of it. I was about to take my first bite of it, and then there was an announcement: we've changed the destination of this train. It's now going to wherever. Everyone needs to get off. I didn't even have a bite of it.
But do you think
this day, I still not had a bite of a
Does anyone have a
sausage.
vegetarian sausage?
No, but
Vegetarian sausage.
But were the two connected somehow, the vegetarian sausage and the train being diverted?
No.
'Cause it seems to me there was someone up there telling you something.
Sounds like a blasphemy to order in the first place.
All right, I'm afraid we are almost done. But before we have to go, we've got time for this. Any mum will know that juggling the demands of work and parenthood can seem nearly impossible at times. But one woman showed that sometimes you can do it all when she took to the catwalk while breastfeeding her daughter. Mara Martin cradled 5-month-old daughter Aria at the same time as strutting her stuff in a gold bikini at the casting for a magazine. After she said, I can't believe I'm waking up to headlines with me and my daughter in them for doing something I do every day. I'm so grateful to be able to share this message and hopefully normalise breastfeeding and also show others that women can do it all. Mara and Aria, you're our straight walkers of the week.
I'm not so sure
Nick,
you walk down an
this is normalising breastfeeding.
I think no, breastfeeding's fine, but it's something I do every day. What, walk in front of hundreds of people with that poor child?
But do you think your child is no longer hungry just because you need to go on a catwalk?
No, listen, that's no problem, but not in front of all those flashing cameras for the
what's your
baby's
hungry
sake.
baby
I highly doubt this child was hungry at that moment.
Should you ever express milk?
I try sometimes.
Talk about
I don't get on very well.
Talk about cows.
signals,
It's a horrendous thing to have to do.
I'm not sure I'd want to eat mine.
Surely she was just making a
along
point.
catwalk.
It's easy enough.
Yeah.
It's making a point, and I think it's a good point to make.
Thank you,
All right.
Greg. That's all we've got time for. But do be sure to join us again next week. Thank you for watching.